years. 17 years. That's 119 dog years. So I take very special pleasure in welcoming several members of the Korean National Assembly with us today. I only hope that your assembly functions better than our Congress. I have made the trip between Washington and Seoul 4 times since I came to the Wilson Center 3 years ago, and I know it's a long trip. So we're especially gratified that so many distinguished diplomats, scholars, and other visitors made that trip here today to enjoy our summer monsoon weather. We're mindful, by the way, and turning serious for a moment, of the enormous tragedy of the loss of the ferry 2 months ago and the loss of hundreds of lives, mostly school kids. As a grandmother and mother myself, I cannot imagine the pain their parents feel and the pain your country feels. And please know that the Wilson Center offers our most sincere condolences. Our conference comes today at a moment of great political and economic change in East Asia. Change that finds Korea, the Republic of Korea, playing a leading role. China's reemergence as a great power has reshuffled the geopolitical deck, with implications for both Beijing's neighbors and those countries like the United States more distant. North Korea continues to play regional bad boy, underscoring the crucial importance of the US-ROK alliance and providing an opportunity for President Obama during his recent visit to Korea to restate America's commitment to the security and well-being of the Republic of Korea. The Korea-US Free Trade Agreement has given new depth to the economic ties linking our two peoples. And I often say that the one vote I miss, that I had left Congress before this vote was taken, was the vote for the Colombia, Panama, and Republic of Korea free trade agreements. That was a very significant vote, and one of the few really important things that our Congress has done in recent years. It's my hope that Korea will eventually also join the Trade Promotion Partnership, TPP, which would serve to bind our two nations even closer. And I hope that our Congress and the White House find a way to break through the political gridlock and enact the Trade Promotion Authority, which is necessary to approve TPP once it's finally negotiated. Few final comments. Korea plays a big role in programming at the Wilson Center. Most of you know this. And that role includes, 1, the work of our Asia program, headed by Bob, on important regional trade and security issues. 2, the work of our History and Public Policy program, using declassified archival documents on North Korea and inter-Korean relations. 3, the work of our Urban Sustainability Laboratory on urbanization and disaster management. We hope to launch very soon a new Korea initiative that will include the work of all these programs plus more. And a number of you, both in government and in the private sector, are being very helpful to us. And we predict, that doesn't mean it's happened yet, very good news soon. And we want to say that the work that Korea is embedded in our work, and Korea is a place we will continue to focus. Again, my thanks to Chairman Gong and the East Asia Foundation for your partnership with us and our most active programs. We are pleased to welcome, or we will be pleased, I don't think he's arrived yet, the new Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian Affairs, who will speak to you in a few moments. And sadly, I cannot stay. This is a little drama that Ambassador Ahn and I have been having for a while, but I really have a good reason why I cannot stay. The Defense Minister of Germany has just arrived here at my invitation. And so you have plenty of enormously capable Wilson Center people, especially Bob Hathaway, to continue this program. I wish you all welcome, and I'm sorry to miss the excellent food. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Congresswoman Harman, and good luck with the defense minister. You won't get as good a food. I am pleased and gratified to see that we have a full room. To be honest with you, my concern was that we were going to have too full a room. But I think we still have a couple of empty seats, so we can take a couple more people. Anyway, thanks very much to all of you who have come. I want to acknowledge our appreciation to and our indebtedness to the East Asia Foundation, who have worked very closely with us in organizing this, and then who, moreover, have seen that a really top-tier caliber of Korean participants have joined us today, and I'll be introducing the chairman of the foundation in just a minute. We have so many distinguished people in this room, I hesitate to even begin to single them out. So I'm not for the most part, but I'm going to make one exception, and I hope you'll excuse me because I'm only going to say one name, but he's an old friend of mine of more than 20 years standing, and I believe he's the only former U.S. diplomat to Korea in the room today, so Tom Hubbard. Tom, we of course are delighted to have you here. I would like now to introduce the chairman of the East Asia Foundation. Gong has an extraordinarily distinguished career. Many of you, maybe even most of you, know him and know about him. He was a distinguished diplomat, serving in a series of important posts overseas as well as in Seoul. At one time or another, he was his country's ambassador to Brazil, to the Soviet Union, to Japan. None of those, I might add, are inconsequential posts. He was also, and I guess in many ways, this was the crowning point of his diplomatic career, he served for more than 2 years as foreign minister of his country. Mr. Minister, Mr. Ambassador, we are appreciative for you and the work of the foundation, and I would invite you to come up now and say a few words.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Hathaway. In a few minutes, I think Honorable Daniel Russel, Assistant Undersecretary of State, will be here. As I was told, Ambassador Ahn, Ambassador of the Republic of Korea to Washington, Honorable Ms. Chu Mi-ae and Dr. Kil Jung-woo, members of the National Assembly of the Republic of Korea, and distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the East Asia Foundation, I sincerely thank you all for participating in this assembly to deliberate on the issue of assessing the threats facing the US-ROK alliance. It has already been 61 years since Korea and the US became allies in accordance with our Mutual Defense Treaty of 1953, which was concluded following the Korean War. Ever since, both nations have fostered trust and friendship as credible allies. We Koreans never forgot some 50,000 young American soldiers who gave their lives for the cause of the freedom during the Korean War. Ever since, the Koreans fought with the United States in Vietnam, Afghanistan, and Iraq as members of the coalition forces. Overcoming countless challenges against liberal democracy and market economy, we are proud that our two nations have built one of the most powerful and successful military alliances in history. In April this year, President Barack Obama visited Korea in his tour to Asian countries and held a summit talk with President Park Geun-hye. Both presidents agreed that alliance between the United States and the Republic of Korea remains a linchpin of the security and prosperity in Northeast Asia, and that it will be further strengthened as truly comprehensive partnership, which includes not only security and foreign affairs, but also economic, social, and cultural cooperation. As you can see, the ROK-US alliance has developed upon the fertile soil of mutual consideration, respect, and deep-rooted trust. Moving forward, the alliance should be consolidated even more to act as a deterrence against North Korea's threat. But gradually, for the security and prosperity of Northeast Asia and eventually global peace as well. As long as there are threats against the Republic of Korea and the United States, and as long as our two nations uphold the values of liberal democracy and market economies, our alliance shall not, nor should it, falter. However, the current changes in the international environment surrounding Korea and the United States have made us face some uneasy challenges. The rise of China, both in military and economic terms, has led that nation towards fervent nationalism in an attempt to regain a national pride lost over a century of humiliation and dishonor. In response, Japan is relying more on historic revisionism in her course to making Japan a normal sovereign state, which is causing anxiety among neighboring countries, even like Korea, her virtual ally. These changes indicate that traditional borders between friendship and rivalry in this region have become somewhat murkier. The expression Asian paradox, whether you like the expression or not, describes this situation where economic interdependence and political conflict coexist. In order to handle the new security situation in East Asia, the United States is pursuing a rebalancing policy, which obviously requires firm ROK-US-Japan cooperation. This will be enhanced only after the Korea-Japan relationship has been restored. In my view, Japan is more responsible than Korea to solve this problem as a former perpetrator. Many of my friends in Japan say that Prime Minister Abe has a little more room to maneuver in domestic politics than my President Park Geun-hye. If we can do so, if he can do so, it is sincerely desirable that he immediately make a decision to solve the comfort women issue, which has only 54 survivors remaining. That will help bring down the barrier between Korea and Japan and pave the way to bring the heads of the two nations to the table for talks. Recently, I have heard a story, believe it or not. Some Japanese scholars and government officials visiting this capital seem to suggest to their US counterparts that Korea has already shifted toward China, considering its trade relations, and therefore that United States should count out Korea. Well, if only the number matters, yes, sir. Our trade with China is roughly 21% of our total foreign trade. If Japan says this is a reason to count out Korea, I wonder what number is the case with Japan's trade with China, where China is her number one customer. On top of all this, economic regionalism in the Asia-Pacific region is being visualized through TPP, and RCEP, as Honorable former Congressman Jane Harman just mentioned. The new order of the region will surely pose challenges on ROK-US cooperation in the future. But as long as we value the alliance, we shall overcome whatever they may be. Truly, how many challenges face our alliance, and yet all threats from DPRK have never ceased. They are barraging South Korean citizens with their aggressive and harsh rhetorics every day. And I only wish words were enough to satisfy them, not real live bombs. As we are all aware, North Korea has pushed toward their third nuclear experiment last year, which endangers not only South Korea, but Asian security as a whole. The solidity and flexibility of the ROK-US alliance should act, as they have in the past, as a deterrent in such a critical situation. The ROK-US alliance is in its 60s. We cannot just let it age. In order to maintain the alliance's resilience, both the ROK and US should focus on each other's needs and requirements in days to come. Finally, let me take a few moments for a commercial break. The East Asia Foundation was established in 2005 by generous funding and the initial leadership of Mr. Chung Mong-gu, the chairman of Hyundai Motor Company. The foundation has been working ever since, among others, to cultivate and expand human and knowledge network among Asians and build trust and eventually contribute to the peace and prosperity of Asia. For these endeavors, we publish a quarterly journal named Global Asia to promote understanding and to make intellectual ties among Asian nations. In conclusion, let me once again thank you all the participants here, and please remember my heartfelt gratitude goes to the staff of the center, Wilson Center, and Asia Foundation as well. Thank you so much.
Mr. Chairman, you mentioned Global Asia, and I might also have mentioned that in my introduction. Let me simply tell you that that has become required reading for all of us who pay a lot of attention to Asia. So thank you for your part in publishing that. We will now hear from someone who A, has already been introduced, and B, needs no introduction in this room. Ambassador Ahn represents South Korea here in Washington. As you could tell from what Congresswoman Harman said, he has, in the 12 months or so he's been here, already established quite a reputation in this town as someone who understands how this town works or doesn't work, and is utterly devoted to further strengthening the partnership between our two countries. Ambassador Ahn, also a distinguished diplomatic career, serving as ambassador elsewhere before here, serving most recently as the first vice minister in the Foreign Affairs and Trade Ministry. I could go on considerably longer, but people came to hear you, not me. So, Ambassador Ahn.
Well, thank you, Robert, for that very kind introduction. And I just look around the room, and I tell myself, this is, as Robert said, it is about 1 year since I came to this town. And I look around the room and I tell myself, maybe this is one of the happiest days that I'm having here in town, if not the happiest. And then why do I say that? And I think there are at least 3 reasons why I think this must be one of my happiest days here in Washington, D.C., as I look back the past 1 year. First reason. Well, somehow it seems to be the case that all of my favorite people in town, somehow, well, Robert, you succeeded in getting them all together in one single place. So thank you so much. So let me just try to recognize only some of them. Ambassador Gong and Ambassador Kim Sung-hwan, they are my favorite former bosses. And you can imagine, I have had thousands of bosses, but somehow they happen to be my favorite bosses. And I look at Honorable Chu Mi-ae, and then Honorable Kil Jong-woo, and then there are almost 300 Korean members of National Assembly. Somehow they happen to be 2 of my most favorite members of the National Assembly, right? And I look at Dr. Ahn Chung-young, and Dr. Moon Jong-in, and Dr. Park Cheol-hee, and they just happen to be 3 of my most favorite academics coming from Korea. Last but not least, then of course, Ambassador Daniel Russel, he just came in to join up with us. And then I have to tell you this, which is that for me, Ambassador Daniel Russel is American Express card. Can you imagine why I say that? Don't leave home without him, right? And the reason why I say that is because I cannot get anything done without, of course, Danny's help. So that's the reason why I say Daniel Russel is my American Express card. Second reason why I say this is my happiest day is because of the venue. We are now at the Woodrow Wilson Center. And I have to tell you this, which is that before coming to Washington as an ambassador 1 year back, then I had the pleasure of working in this town in 1981, 1990. So this is my 3rd time to work in Washington, D.C. And even from 1981, I knew that think tanks in town, think tanks in Washington, D.C., they have a very special place in the United States. That's where much thinking, in fact, is being done. But at the same time, that thinking quite oftentimes leads to actions. That's what I came to find about the function and operation of think tanks here in Washington, D.C. And I was thinking back in 1981, again in 1990, I was telling myself, well, how good it would be, how wonderful it would be if we could have Korea chairs, if we could have Korea programs at those think tanks. But it didn't happen in 1981. It didn't happen in 1990. But I have to report to you, it was several years ago, that they opened Korea Chair at the CSIS. It was the first Korea Chair. And 2 weeks ago, I wonder if there is anybody coming from Brookings Institution? Nobody? Right. Well, it was just 2 weeks ago that we opened the second Korea Chair. And then as Honorable Jane Harmon said, we are going to open Korea program at the Woodrow Wilson Center soon enough. So it is, so it is amazing, as I told you, think tanks have very special place in Washington, D.C., and quite different from 1981 or quite different from 1990. We are having all these Korea chairs and then Korea program, and that it will be right here at the Woodrow Wilson Center that we are going to open the Korea program soon enough. So that is the second reason why I feel so happy today. My third and last reason why I'm saying this happens to be my happiest day is because the topic we are going to discuss today. And then I looked at the topic and I said to myself, maybe this is the most timely topic we can think about and then we can discuss about today. Why? Because well, it has already been stated by Ambassador Gong in the sense that last year, 2013, we celebrated the 60th anniversary of security alliance between Korea and then the United States. And then we have said for the past 1 year that the relations between Korea and the United States, it has been never closer. That's what we have been saying for the past 1 year. And at the same time, as an ambassador, I had to face many questions being raised with me, and then the same question has been raised with me again and again, which was, where would Korea-US relations be after 60 years? And I said, well, for the coming 60 years, it will continue from strength to strength. And then I used to provide at least 3 reasons as I'm doing it today. But at the same time, let us just think about it. Korea-US relations, it has been never closer, and I'm very confident that it is going to grow from strength to strength in the coming 60 years. But at the same time, there is one thing against which we must be guarding ourselves against, which is we must not take our relationship for granted. That's what I always tell myself, and I think that will be something already in your mind, and then how could we do that? And I think one of the best things we could be doing would be to think about not only what brings us together, but also to think about what are the risks, what are the threats, which could be undermining our relationship. And I think that is the reason why I think the topic we are going to discuss today, the threats to the bilateral relations between Korea and the United States, is the most timely subject we can discuss about today. Not because the threats are important, but because it is far better to think about them in advance and prepare ourselves and guard ourselves against these threats rather than being taken over by those threats. So that is the third reason why I'm so glad to be here today. But at the same time, let me just wrap up myself by telling you once again, thank you so much. And then let me have the pleasure of listening to my American Express card. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Ambassador. I think it's an extraordinary coincidence we managed to get all of your favorite people in this room. But if we've had some small role in making this one of your favorite days, then we obviously are gratified. We are now going to hear our keynote address from the Honorable Daniel Russel, who is, as you all know, the Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian and Pacific Affairs. He has just recently returned from Asia. Probably one of the disadvantages, though he may correct me, one of the disadvantages of his current job as opposed to his immediate past job is that he probably has to spend even more time on the road now than he did in his previous job. His previous job was in the White House as Special Assistant to the President and Senior Director for Asia, the National Security Council. In this capacity, he was and is one of the principal architect of President Obama's rebalancing toward the Asian Pacific strategy. And I think it's fair to say that as Secretary Russel goes, so goes the rebalance. He has had an extraordinary distinguished career in the service of his country, and we are delighted to have him with us now. He has said that he will be happy to take a few questions after his prepared remarks, so we'll look forward to that as well. Danny, welcome to the Wilson Center, and we look forward to your remarks.
Thank you very much, Bob, for the introduction. Thank you, Ambassador Ahn. If I'm your Amex card, I assume that means I don't need a visa anymore. Look, I'm really happy to be here at the Wilson Center and to contribute to what's obviously a really terrific program today. On April 25th and 6th, President Obama visited the Republic of Korea for an unprecedented fourth time to reaffirm our alliance and more broadly, our truly comprehensive global partnership. just a month earlier, President Park, in the former East German city of Dresden, laid out her comprehensive vision for a peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula, really just days after North Korea provocatively had launched 2 medium-range ballistic missiles. And next month, President Park will host Chinese President Xi Jinping in Seoul at a time when both ROK-China economic ties and the region's challenges are increasing. So these events, to me, show the strength of our alliance, that show the challenges that it faces, show the Republic of Korea's growing confidence, and show the changes taking place in the region, all highlighting Korea's prospects for an even brighter future and the potential stumbling blocks on the way there. Now, you all know these issues. You know the Korean Peninsula extremely well. There's a lot of wisdom in the room here today. I have to say at the outset, it's really an honor for me to be here with Minister Gong. I had the privilege, he may not remember, but I had the privilege of working with him in the early 90s when he was the foreign minister, and I was the head of the embassy's political external unit under Ambassador Jim Laney. This was the era of the agreed framework, but Minister Gong was already a legend, having been involved in diplomacy actively since the 1950s. And it's also really great for me to see my good friend, Minister Kim Sung-hwan. I got to know the minister when I was the National Security Council staffer responsible for Korea. I think we can think back to the time we were planning President Obama's trip to South Korea, President Lee's state visit here to Washington. As you know, President Obama has visited Seoul more than any other foreign capital. And Minister Kim's role behind the scenes was absolutely essential to establishing a strong relationship between the two leaders. So over the decades of working with the Republic of Korea, I've seen the alliance modernize, and I've seen relations between our countries grow and evolve. And they've advanced markedly under President Obama, who developed close ties first with President Lee Myung-bak and now with President Park Geun-hye. And I want to underscore upfront that the growth in our relationship and the scope of what our two nations do together has been driven in large part by the Republic of Korea's incredible progress. In just a few generations, moving from a nation ravaged and impoverished by war to a modern, democratic, and prosperous global power. Naturally, the threat posed by North Korea has been an enduring focal point of our alliance for 60 plus years now. And that threat, specifically the North Korean nuclear, ballistic, and proliferation programs, is a grave threat. It's a persistent threat, and it's a growing threat. But working together, the United States and the Republic of Korea are addressing it through a comprehensive and a principled strategy that uses all the tools at our disposal: economic, diplomatic, military. Militarily, we deter the North by maintaining a robust and increasingly interoperable alliance. It features some of the best trained, best equipped warfighters in the world. Diplomatically, we work hand in hand with each other and with our other six-party partners and with the broader international community to hold North Korea to account. And economically, we've enacted both domestically and multilaterally extremely tough sanctions on the DPRK. Our strategy is to sharpen the DPRK's choice, to raise the cost of continued defiance and effectively leave the DPRK no viable alternative but to honor its commitments and to come into compliance with its international obligations. First and foremost, with its obligation to irreversibly and verifiably denuclearize. North Korea can never achieve security and prosperity while it pursues nuclear weapons. But we continue to make clear to North Korea that meeting its obligations and taking irreversible steps to denuclearize will put it on a path to attain the security, the economic development, and the international acceptance that it wants. But while security is the focus of today's event, and North Korea is never far from our collective minds, let me emphasize that the US-ROK relationship goes today far beyond a localized defensive alliance driven by the DPRK threat. Today, if you'll permit me, I'll be ambitious and cover the US-ROK alliance in 5 parts. 1, an overview of the challenges we face in America's broader regional strategy, which provides the context for the alliance. 2, the ROK-US global partnership. 3, our bilateral relations, including security. 4, regional challenges, and 5, regional opportunities. As I said, there is one single overarching threat to the alliance, which comes from the DPRK. But the alliance also faces at least 3 principal challenges as I see it. First, the challenge of expanding our vision for what the alliance can accomplish. Our ambition should reflect South Korea's increased economic power, its military capacity, its global role. This is a pretty happy challenge for us to face. Second, executing the nuts and bolts modernization of our defense relationship. This includes continuing to upgrade equipment and training to improve interoperability, and also working out the transfer of wartime operational control. It includes sorting out how to keep our alliance politically sustainable, and how, for example, to resolve land use issues when cities grow to reach the edges of our bases. It also includes addressing the costs that come from keeping US troops in a highly developed and increasingly expensive country. Third, ensuring that our alliance adapts to meet the challenges and takes advantage of the opportunities of the changing dynamics in the region. These include China's rise, ASEAN's growing centrality, and Japan's revitalized economy and renewed political stability. The regional context also includes America's sustained rebalance to the Asia-Pacific region. I see a lot of familiar faces in the audience. This is a sophisticated group. I'm not going to review the full rationale and the full history of the rebalance. But briefly, it started when President Obama took office in 2009, and with a view to America's economic recovery and future, he decided to make the region a strategic priority and to approach it as an integrated whole. And as a result, the administration set about reinvigorating our treaty alliances in the region. We upgraded our engagement in regional forums like ASEAN and the East Asia Summit. And we focused more time and attention on emerging powers in the region, as well as strengthened our cooperation and our economic ties with long-time friends and with newer partners, taking a holistic approach through programs like the Lower Mekong Initiative, which brings together several nations with common interests, and launching energy partnerships and other initiatives. Over the last couple of decades, the Republic of Korea has emerged as a positive force for security, stability, and prosperity across the globe. And South Korea's position has been strengthened immeasurably by its phenomenal performance, the miracle on the Han with the equally important economic and political components. Plus, the Republic of Korea's willingness, even eagerness, to share its success with the world. And as a result, as I mentioned, we've developed an increasingly comprehensive global partnership. It's underpinned by these strong economic and people-to-people ties, by shared values of democracy and respect for human rights. and also, of course, by our alliance, which is the linchpin of peace and security in the region. Our burgeoning global partnership with the ROK really shows what two countries can do when they make an affirmative decision to rally behind shared interests and shared values. Development is one example. 60 years ago, the United States provided development assistance and sent Peace Corps volunteers to South Korea. Now, KOICA, the ROK's Peace Corps equivalent, is the second largest international volunteer corps in the world. Korea's rapid development, its economic miracle and democratization inspire striving nations all over the world. Now, the ROK plays an important role in advancing global economic and financial stability through its membership in the G20. And today, both the US and the Republic of Korea offer assistance and paths to peace and development to countries that seek our help. The ROK is also a global leader on nuclear security. There are not many countries that better understand the threat of nuclear weapons than the ROK. And South Korea works well beyond its own neighborhood to advance our shared vision for a nuclear weapons-free world. It hosted leaders from around the world for the Nuclear Security Summit in 2012. And the ROK has been a close partner in addressing concerns with Iran's nuclear program by helping to implement the joint plan of action through the P5+1 negotiating process. And we collaborate on a wide range of non-proliferation and counter-proliferation issues. South Korea has also worked closely with us to support the mission to remove Syria's chemical weapons. And in Afghanistan, our troops have served side by side while our development personnel have worked together to help the country build a foundation for the future. And our work together extends well beyond security. The scope of our collaboration, for example, to advance science and human development is impressive. We engage in far-sighted scientific research in fields from nanotechnology to earth sciences, as well as clean energy technologies like smart grids and fuel cells that may soon be making a difference in the lives of all of us. We work together on practical applications in science in fields like advanced manufacturing and aeronautics. We have important roles to play in addressing climate change. And we're helping people in immediate need by promoting maternal and child health in Ghana and Ethiopia, for example, and working together on humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, particularly in Southeast Asia. So my point is that our global partnership is an extensive one that touches on almost every continent. And while I know that the conference is focused very much on the threats and the challenges facing the alliance, I think that the starting point for your deliberation should be the alliance's fundamental strengths. First of all, our bilateral relationship has never been stronger. And as I said, it touches on almost every field of human endeavor. Second, our economic relationship has never been closer. The US-Korea Free Trade Agreement just took effect barely 2 years ago, and over the course of last year, we've had $125 billion in bilateral trade. Our people-to-people ties also continue to grow. In the last decade and a half, the number of Korean Americans has gone up 41% to a total of more than 1.7 million, a figure that includes some pretty distinguished people like World Bank President Jim Kim and our friend and immensely talented ambassador in Seoul, Sung Kim, and many, many other distinguished Americans. And of course, as I indicated, our security ties are strong and enduring. America's commitment to South Korea's security remains unwavering. And we continue to strengthen our combined defensive posture on the peninsula. We're constantly working to improve readiness and interoperability in order to meet existing and emerging security threats. This includes shared investment in ballistic missile defense and intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance capabilities. Our new Special Measures Agreement provides important resources that help sustain the presence of US forces in Korea. This recent agreement is just one more proof point that both nations are politically and economically committed to making our alliance even more sustainable and even more adaptable. But more important than any single proof point is the strength of our people-to-people ties. For example, President Obama's passionate interest in and respect for Korea's devotion to education is matched only by Korean interest in American educational institutions. There are more Korean students studying in the United States than students from our two neighbors, Canada and Mexico, combined. Let me also share one personal vignette. The visit by President Obama to Seoul in April, as the ambassador knows, and of course the ministers recall, was meticulously planned. But frankly, in the course of the visit, to me at least, the most moving moment, the moment that I'll remember forever, was a spontaneous and a heartfelt act at the Blue House when President Obama, speaking for all Americans, expressed condolences for those lost in the Seoul tragedy and movingly called for a moment of silence in their honor. What our two leaders, what our two nations, what our two people shared at that moment says as much about the strength of our alliance as anything I could say. Let me turn to the regional challenges. Because at the same time that South Korea has strengthened its alliance with the United States, it's also pursued peace and prosperity in a very complicated neighborhood. In the face of North Korea's hostile rhetoric and its threats to carry out new provocations, President Park has remained steadfast in maintaining a strong, principled posture and in insisting that the nuclear issue cannot be set aside. But at the same time, she's been consistently extending a hand to the North and laying out a step-by-step process for building trust across the DMZ. She's demonstrated convincingly how the North could benefit economically from steps toward reconciliation and denuclearization. And the United States firmly supports this vision for peaceful reunification. The United States also shares her compassion and her concern for the North Korean people. We're deeply troubled by the deplorable human rights violations taking place in North Korea today that were graphically detailed by the recent UN Commission of Inquiry. We will continue to work closely with the ROK and with others across the international community to seek protection and a better life for the victims of repression, along with accountability for the victimizers. In just a couple of weeks, Seoul will host a visit by Korea's neighbor, China's President Xi Jinping. This is an extraordinary milestone. And I believe it should be helpful in promoting needed cooperation particularly on North Korea. I will say personally, it's particularly gratifying for me since I played way back when a very small role in helping to facilitate the early contacts between Seoul and Beijing. This was in the beginning of the 1990s when I served at the United Nations and worked, I should mention, alongside a very talented South Korean diplomat. You may have heard his name, Yoon Byung-se, when he was stationed at the ROK Observer Mission to the UN. The point I'd like to make, though, is this, that the United States fully supports South Korea's efforts to build strong ties with its neighbors. The flourishing relationship between China and the ROK clearly demonstrates that our alliances in the region are a force for stability, are a force for integration, and that active US engagement is good for those in the Asia-Pacific region. At the same time, and in contrast to improvements with China, relations between Korea and Japan remain strained. Yet both countries have compelling shared interests. Both are free market economies, stable democracies, influential regional actors. Both are crucial US allies. The Director General level dialogue now between Japan and Korea on historical issues is a very important and valuable instrument for working through sensitivities. And the meeting hosted by President Obama last March in The Hague, which brought together President Park and Prime Minister Abe to confer trilaterally on North Korea, was also an important milestone. There is hard work ahead for both sides. This cannot be done by one party alone. And the hard work is made more difficult by politicization and by the erosion of trust. But it's hard work that's made more imperative by the pressing need for cooperation. South Korea and Japan are two of our most important allies, and cooperation between them and trilaterally among us is essential, not just to address the nuclear and missile threats from North Korea, and not just to manage contingencies on the peninsula, but to advance all of our interests and values globally. There are also opportunities along with these challenges. Our strong modern alliance and our global partnership positions the Republic of Korea and the US to seize opportunities throughout the region. We're working together to build up the region's political and economic institutions, which, as I mentioned, is a key aspect of our rebalance. For example, South Korea has stepped up its interactions with the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN. This includes active participation in the ASEAN +3 group. It includes President Park's participation in the East Asia Summit. And it includes Korea's strong role in helping to build up ASEAN's maritime security and disaster relief capacities. In APEC, the US and ROK work closely with the other member economies to expand trade and investment, to promote sustainable growth, and to strengthen trade and investment, and promote regional ties. For example, we're working closely with South Korea to strengthen cross-border education and skills development, increase economic opportunities for women, and develop capacity-building programs to enhance the ability of our economies to participate in high-quality trade agreements. We also welcome South Korea's interest in a hugely important project, the TPP. Right now, our focus is on concluding the negotiations with the current 12 members, but we are committed to continuing to consult very closely with the government of the ROK on meeting the high standards of the TPP and addressing specific areas of concern. It's an ambitious, comprehensive, and high-standard agreement that will promote growth and create jobs both at home and in the region, and includes economies that represent already, just among the 12, nearly 40% of global GDP. Northeast Asia is a very complex region with shifting dynamics and new challenges. But there's one constant here, and that's the friendship between the American people and the Korean people, backed by our unwavering alliance commitments. Korea and the United States signed our first Treaty of Peace, Amity, and Commerce and Navigation 132 years ago. We've been allies for more than 6 decades, and recently we've built a truly remarkable and comprehensive global partnership. I firmly believe that there is much, much more that we can do together, and I'm counting on the sessions this afternoon to shed light on ways we can increase our cooperation and increase the effectiveness of our alliance. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Bob, and open it up for a discussion. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Secretary Russel, for a really comprehensive account. You left out one thing, which I'm going to ask you. Right before you came, Jane Harman said that one of the most important votes that Congress has made in recent years has been to approve the Chorus FTA. You referenced the success to date of that agreement. We're going to be talking more about this afternoon, so why don't you help us by giving us your notion of the agenda for next steps? What still needs to be done on both sides for that agreement to truly fulfill the hopes of its many supporters?
Great. Thanks, Bob. I think that we will look back on the vote that former Representative Harman helped lead, and the Chorus FTA as really outstanding accomplishment, both in our bilateral relationship, but more broadly in 21st century trade policy, because it is an agreement with tremendous benefits to both sides. And frankly, I believe that our team has learned a lot from the Chorus FTA experience, including lessons that undoubtedly are applied in the negotiations over TPP. What remains, to put it simply, is full implementation. It's important to remember that the agreement itself is a staged agreement in which elements come on over time in phases. It is not a light switch that is simply flipped on. A number of the provisions won't be fully realized for years to come. That's part of the magic of eliminating barriers, and doing so in a way that is neither disruptive to the economic system of the two countries, nor is politically unattainable in our democratic systems. So as the full range of provisions of Chorus come into effect, we will begin to see a further acceleration in trade, a further expansion of our exports and imports, and easier access. We are working through some residual issues. I won't tick them off because they're fairly esoteric, but I think that the early returns on the first 2 years of Chorus are extremely positive.
Thank you. Now we have about 10 minutes, and we'd like to give several of you an opportunity to ask questions. I'm going to recognize this lady here first, but before you go, I hope we have a microphone for you. Do we? Good. We're going to bring a microphone to you. If you'll, we got one coming from you from your right, from your other right, that right, yeah. If you'll introduce yourself and then very brief questions, please.
Secretary Russel, my name's Hayley Channer. I'm with the Australian Strategic Policy Institute of Canberra. Thank you very much for your speech. My question goes to the rebalance. A lot has been said about what the US can do to reassure its allies and partners in the Asia-Pacific. I'm very interested in your views on what South Korea can do to support the rebalance, and whether or not you see the main contribution South Korea could make to be in the military area with OPCON transfer, perhaps in the diplomatic area with its relations with Japan, or a political area in terms of messaging. What are your views on that?
Well, thanks for the question. The foreign policy and economic policies of the Republic of Korea are not in service of the U.S. rebalance. The U.S. rebalance and the objectives of the Republic of Korea, I would venture to say, closely overlap and intertwine. So what the ROK is doing in terms of its development assistance throughout Asia, what the ROK is doing in terms of its active trade and investment posture throughout the region, what the ROK is doing in terms of both political mentoring and security assistance and programs throughout the Asia-Pacific region are examples of that overlap. We're working towards a common goal, which is a stable, prosperous, reforming, and increasingly democratic region. Why? Because that is the construct that will bring security as well as prosperity to our people as well. The starting point and the ending point in terms of US and ROK foreign policy towards the region is our own respective national interests. And the similarity, the correlation between our foreign policies is tied by our common values. As a practical matter, I think that a particular area in which the ROK can and should do more, as I alluded to, is in support of the emerging regional institutions built around ASEAN. I was in Burma, in Myanmar last week, along with Deputy Foreign Minister Lee and a number of other Asian counterparts for the senior officials meeting to prepare for the ASEAN Regional Forum meeting in August. The day when the ROK's exclusive interest was in blunting North Korean propaganda is over. Now the ROK is, and the ROK delegation in meetings such as the ASEAN Regional Forum is an active contributor in a broad-based dialogue discussing all of the issues of concern to the region. Everything from health to water security to disaster relief to economic growth to democratic reform to counterproliferation. This is a broad agenda in an important region, and there is a great deal that the Republic of Korea brings to it.
Yes, right here. Again, if you'll wait till we get a mic for you.
Thank you. Excuse me for not standing for the sake of the cameras behind me. John Zan with CTI TV of Taiwan. Mr. Secretary, has there been a conscious effort on the part of the United States to lower its rhetoric over disputes with China over South and East China Sea on the eve of the RingPac exercises, which China joins for the first time, and on the eve of the SNED in Beijing in July? Second question, how do you see the Chinese State Councilor Yang Jiechi's visit to Hanoi and his meeting with the Vietnamese foreign minister over their dispute in the South China Sea? Thank you very much.
The answer to your first question is no. The answer to your second question is I have my fingers crossed. No. More fulsomely, we're not in the business of dialing up or dialing down our statements of principle and our public expressions of concern on major issues in an effort to adjust to the calendar of diplomatic or military engagements. Nor, frankly, do I accept the premise that what you're hearing from the United States is rhetoric. We talk directly to the Chinese at multiple levels, and when necessary and when appropriate, we publicly state our position and our concerns. What is driving the uptick in public expressions of concern from the US government is an uptick in risky and provocative behavior. In particular, we're very concerned about the rise in tensions in the South China Sea And we're seeking to address a fundamental misperception that the issue is one of proving one claimant's right over the other claimants. What matters in cases like this is a respect for the stability and the interests of the region, and respect requires restraint. And what we're asking of all of the claimants, not only China, is the exercise of restraint. Now, many of us happen to believe that large and powerful countries have a special obligation to show restraint, to show flexibility and show patience. But in any event, it's critical that the claimants do nothing that will inflame an already sensitive situation, regardless of whether they're convinced that their claims and their rights are indisputable. Secondly, we think that the critical principle here is that the rules apply to all of us. No country has done more than the United States to advocate for China's voice being heard in international fora. No country has worked harder to create space for China to help shape the rules in the 21st century. We think that's appropriate. But the other part of the bargain is an acceptance that the rules apply equally to all. And we are asking China, and as we're asking all of the claimants, to clarify their claims in ways that are consistent with international law, including the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, to respect principles of unimpeded commerce, of freedom of navigation, and to take no action that would further destabilize the region or put at greater risk the interests we all share in peaceful and lawful commerce there. I wrote down your second question. On the upcoming visit of State Councilor Yang Jie-chi to Hanoi, we have to wait and see. Obviously, it is a hopeful sign that there is high-level dialogue between Hanoi and Beijing. It is disappointing that their bilateral talks have not resulted in the withdrawal of the ships and the oil rig that are together from both sides, creating a great deal of anxiety and a great deal of uncertainty. I certainly hope that the two neighbors can make a rapid agreement on de-escalating, even if they aren't able to reconcile their competing claims in the short term. Thanks.
We're going to squeeze in one more question. We're going to ask one of our Korean visitors, Dr. Ahn.
Well, my question is related on the TPP progress. You mentioned that TPP is very important initiative under President Obama administration. Well, when do you see how soon the original 12 signatory economies will reach the deal, given the uncertain factors such as, House Democrat, about 151 members opposed to granting a fast-track authority to President Obama. And I know that the US and Japan has very sticking, the point to settle down 5 sensitive items in agriculture and auto. So I would like to see when, how soon, and if it drags on, is there any possibility for Korea to join as a founding member rather than Korea could be accepted once you lock up the initial the deal. Okay, thank you.
Well, thanks for the question, Dr. Ahn. The way to think about TPP, in my view, is this. If it were easy, it would have been done by now. And if the 12 negotiating partners were willing to give up their ambition to create a truly high-quality trade agreement that would set the standards for the 21st century, it would have been done by now. There's a saying in English, you want it bad, you get it bad. We want it good, and that is taking time. But the corollary to that is that we all really want it. No country among the 12 embarked on this process with any goal other than to succeed. And I, for one, am entirely confident that we will succeed. Former Congresswoman Harman is in a vastly better position than I am to explain the complexities of Congress and congressional approval. But there's one thing I know. You can't get agreement among a majority of members of Congress on an abstraction. So until we have an agreement, a deal, that every member of Congress can look at and evaluate and make a judgment about, to my mind, and of course I'm a civil servant diplomat, not a politician, it's a moot point. We all want to see the rapid conclusion of the agreement, both for economic reasons and for strategic reasons. We believe that TPP brings huge benefits to all of us and to the region. I'll defer to my friend and colleague, Ambassador Froman, on the hypotheticals about who might be able to come in at what stage, but I have, as I said, a high degree of confidence that we are making rapid progress. I certainly know from being in Tokyo with the president when he held extensive discussions with Prime Minister Abe and when Ambassador Froman spent many late nights with Trade Minister Amari, that we have made tremendous progress on a bilateral basis with Japan, and that has created a pathway forward for not only the US, but for the other 10 partner countries to similarly make progress. I can't speak to the exact timing. We would like to see it soon. I know that the President, Mike Froman, and others have made clear that we welcome the ROK's interest, but are focused in the first instance now on closing out with among the 12, and then looking to next steps. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Secretary Russel. I hope when you go back to the Parliament, you'll report to Secretary Kerry that you attract a standing room only audience. We know that everybody in town wants a bit of you, and so we're grateful for you coming to the Wilson Center. I have a few administrative announcements, but first you'll join me in expressing our appreciation to Secretary Russel. Thanks very much. Really appreciate it. Now, if you'll listen to me for about 15 seconds, we're going to take a brief break, but only a brief break. We will adjourn, go out this door, and then immediately across the hall, we'll go to the auditorium. We are going to get started in 9 minutes. For those of you who would like to visit the restroom, once you go out,